Welcome to It's No Secret, a podcast for Kiwis who want their money questions answered.
Ready, steady, go.
This podcast will answer the money questions you may or may not have on your mind. We'll talk to real Kiwis and share truths about our own financial lives.
Both the successes and the failures. Because the truth is, there is no secret to achieving financial freedom. Hello and welcome to It's No Secret. I'm Kat, and today we're back with another Money Moments special episode where we chat to real Kiwis about their experience with money. This one is a little bit different because today we are joined by Colin Magee, CEO and founder of Catalist. Catalist is a stock exchange connecting everyday investors and Kiwi businesses with big potential. Colin has over 2 decades of financial experience working as a finance lawyer in London, which we touch on, as well as general counsel for an investment bank. He then moved out to New Zealand around 11 years ago, and his role here was the head of conduct at the Financial Markets Authority, or the FMA, where he led the teams responsible for regulating stock markets. We dive in today around Colin's early journey with money, and then we also talk about what is Catalist and what even is a growth business market. How does this work from a stock exchange point of view, and how is this different to the NZX? We also touch on all the exciting things about founding a company in the financial services industry, which is heavily regulated, and Colin is so well placed to talk about that given his background at the FMA. So please enjoy this episode. Chat to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us today, Colin.
Thank you.
I thought a good place to start before we sort of jump into some of the nitty-gritty that Catalist do and how, an everyday investor can use the Catalist services, is really just to give our listeners a bit of a 101 of Colin, what made you interested in financial services in the first place? And we talk a lot with our guests on the show of kind of what their relationship with money was like growing up as a kid, because that's really where we get, whether we remember it or not, a lot of our founding behaviors around money and how we approach finance. So, tell us, what kind of is your earliest memory of money or your relationship like with money as a child?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Kat.
No worries.
Yes, I was thinking about this. The earliest memory I have of money really is lunch money for going to school.
Yeah.
I grew up in quite a traditional family. My dad came across from Ireland to England, but I grew up in Cambridge in England. Mum was a nurse, and so they had a very traditional view of money. We didn't really talk a lot about it, but what we did talk about is you've got to save.
Yes.
So when I started at a school where you had the school cafeteria, they would give me a certain amount of money at the beginning of the week, and that had to cover my lunch money.
Yep.
If I had any left over at the end of the week, that was my pocket money.
Yeah.
And so that's where you develop, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a really good thing for children at the moment, because I think perhaps we need to encourage them to eat a full, healthy.
Yes, right. Not skimp on lunch.
Exactly. But it really encouraged me to think about every penny that I was spending, and is that actually worth more to me, what I'm buying, than the money in my pocket?
Yep.
And so I didn't really have a concept of investing then, but it was definitely, I've got this limited amount of money and I can either spend it on X, and if I spend it on X, then I can't spend it on Y.
Yep.
So that's where I remember that from. And then I started having jobs quite young. I was actually a musician, so I played in a Irish ceilidh band for years.
Amazing.
And so we earned some when you're young. That's actually quite a good income for a youngster.
Was it busking or kind of gigs or
mostly,
little like
ceilidh? So you sort of get together. It's an event. Everyone comes along. There's a caller who tells people what to do in the dances, and you play the. We've got 4 musicians who play the music for it.
Awesome.
So it's good fun, and at the end of the night, you get some money in your hand.
Yeah.
So as good as a youngster.
Yeah.
And I guess that was probably starting from about 12, 13, something like that. And that's the time when, again, it was just about accumulate. So I had my own little money box that I put the money in, and that was a physical. You could see the money accumulating.
Yep.
And that's progressed, I guess, to a savings account. But again, it was just about accumulating. I don't think I even knew how to take money out of that savings account. It was just you went
going in there, never to be seen again.
You went
or
to the
sometime in
post
the
office.
future.
They wrote in the book about how much you had, and that was it. So those are my earliest memories of saving and money.
Cool. And so you touched on that. I guess there wasn't a lot of money chat going on in the household. How did you then start to learn as you became a bit older, like even this concept of investing or looking beyond that?
Yeah, it's a really hard question. I had to think about when I first thought about investing. And I didn't do any investing other than putting money in the bank until I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's because I wasn't aware of investing. But I can't remember when I first became aware of investing. I guess I'm quite lucky that my parents encouraged good education, and so I must have learnt something of that at school. We definitely didn't have explicit lessons on investing or money matters. But by the time you've been through school, you're sort of aware that there is this concept of investing and that you get money back from that, and that would be a good thing.
Yep.
But I really didn't have an experience of it, not like the sort of youngsters today who can have a Sharesies account and actually get some experience.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of asking to know what a stock exchange is at the age of like 10, 11.
I'd have no idea what a stock exchange was.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm pretty much the same, but we have nephews at the moment that we invest for, and they actually messaged us the other day through their mum and were like, because they don't have a phone, and they're like, I want to be able to, can you give us our login details so that we can log in, because our friends at school are talking about our Sharesies account and we want to compare. Yeah. And this is like the 8-year-old.
That's amazing because when I was growing up, you'd have never compared anything. It was all private.
And quite secretive, and I guess a bit taboo to ask other people what they're doing or how they're going. I remember
asking my dad one time how much he earned or what they earned, and I think I got a right telling off. But you don't ask people that.
So rude, and it's just a totally different story now.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. So then you obviously came out to New Zealand at some point. Was that for work, career?
No, so I'd been working in London I worked in London for about 15 years. I met a Kiwi out there, as everyone does.
Yes.
We lived together in London for 9 years before she got fed up of the cold, and I think we both got fed up of the standing on the stations in the rain, waiting for the public transport that was too full to get on.
Yep.
We came out to New Zealand 11 years ago now.
Yep.
Didn't really know what I was going to do when I came out here. I'd been my prior roles. Before I left, I was general counsel of an investment bank, and then we knew we were going to move. So for the last about 18 months, I did a bit of consulting to try and get a bit more variety of things, because I thought, I'm quite specialist here in a sort of legal governance role.
Sure.
And I think I might need to be a bit more generalist for coming to New Zealand. We came here, and one of the first I looked around for what was around, and the role at the Financial Markets Authority, the regulator, came up. I had a look that looked interesting, and that's why I landed there.
Awesome. And what have you found that's different, I guess, from a financial point of view? I'm assuming that in a work capacity, it's quite different by scale and size and all those sorts of things. And obviously the regulations are different as well. But in terms of, I guess, views around money or how people approach things in New Zealand versus the UK, were there things that when you first moved, you just thought like, wow?
I think in general, the culture's very similar in New Zealand to the UK. I don't think that there's a huge difference in the way people approach money. I think in New Zealand sort of got that same, at least when I first moved over, it was a very similar attitude. You don't really talk to friends about money. I think that's changed a lot in the last 10 years. And I think that's a good thing. But it was, very similar culture. And I think perhaps the only thing is that it's just a bit more laid back than, especially London. I mean, London, you've got so many different cultures there. It's I think I probably worked with more Kiwis and South Africans in some of the businesses I worked in London than are even in some of the businesses here. So.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess a very broad range of like wealth situations and personal situations, in addition to all the varying cultures that perhaps you see here in New Zealand.
Yes, although I think you've still got that full spectrum here, and I think it's I think it's always I always enjoy things where you're mixing with everyone from all different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first things I got into when I was came to New Zealand is I went along to support the Warriors, and so we had season tickets there for quite a few years.
Okay, good.
And the main thing about that is it's just a different slice of society that you sort of, it's great to engage with people in that atmosphere.
Yeah. Love that. I imagine, I guess jumping back a little bit. So you got your law degree from the University of Oxford, which is very cool. I actually lived in Oxford for a year after finishing school. I kind of had my gap year, which is, I guess, the like OE equivalent that Kiwis would do, and went and lived in Oxford and worked at a boarding school for a whole year. Wow. Which was, again, another insight into, I guess, the type of people that send their kids to a very exclusive boarding school in Oxford, of all places. So, were there things at university, you obviously studying law, but were there things in that experience as well that kind of started to open your eyes to, I guess, the realm of possibility in finance or...
Okay, at that stage at university, it's more, my interest has always been around problem solving and just logic and working things out. So I don't think I really was even focused on what I was going to do after university. I sort of fell into law because that was what interested me in the logic, and I'd done sciences before, and I think it's actually quite closely connected in working out how to solve problems.
Sure.
And then when you do law, it's easy to fall into a big law firm. So I took that option, and the big law firms in London all really focus on financial law. So that's really the first time I came across the sort of commercial finance world. It wasn't something I deliberately was seeking out. And that sort of mindset of wanting to solve logic problems and work out how things worked, it's those large financial deals. It's great. It's really interesting. It's great fun. Sometimes it's a bit too much work. Sometimes long hours. But really working out how to solve customers' problems and structure things in a way that's going to work from a legal, a regulatory, but also a commercial point of view. That's what really attracted me to that role.
Cool. I think as well, like one thing that gets quite a bit of airtime, I would say, particularly amongst like the younger generations is, they want to do the OE or get the overseas experience and then come back, and kind of the dream is, I guess, returning to New Zealand to work, which it sounds like your wife was potentially doing. She was doing a long extended OE in London, got
very extended.
Extended lots of career time there. How did you both find moving back here in terms of like the pay variations, and was it an adjustment to come here?
I guess that's a huge adjustment coming back from sort of working in large corporates in London.
Yeah, in a big city.
But I guess very lucky position. We both had good education, parents encouraging us to go out and work hard.
Yes.
And so we had good roles in London. So actually by the time I'd been working for 15 years by the time we moved back here, and my wife had been working for 9 or 10. So by the time we moved back here, she'd already bought a little property that she was renting out in Auckland. We thought, we'll go and just live in that as a stopgap while we decide what we're going to do. 11 years later, we're still in the same property.
Oh, great.
And I guess that's part of our sort of, it's a very small property, but it's nice and central. So it's enough for us. We don't have kids, so we've never needed anything larger. I guess that's our sort of approach. We don't spend money on things that aren't really going to benefit us, and we really think about where we're going to spend the money.
Love that. We are a little bit similar, my husband and I, because he lived in Australia, which is where I'm from, and that's where we met, and kind of similar story. And then I had to move to New Zealand, which was always on the cards. He did a very good job of like preparing me very early on, like second date, you'll have to move to New Zealand kind of thing at some point if this is going to continue. And so when we moved back here, we basically just found a rental very, very centrally, quite small, but suited us because going from Melbourne to here, I mean, Melbourne's not as big as London, but like we wanted to be central because I think he was a bit like, if we move too far out of Auckland, it's going to be far too much of a culture shock for Kat. And we've never left the house. We're like there 7.5 years later, we actually bought it off our landlord, and it's been so perfect. And I'm almost like, I don't think we would ever move now, even though it is a little bit small, given that we have a 20-month-old. But, it's that thing of it's just, nice sometimes, particularly I think when you're moving countries, it's hard enough to reestablish yourself. Having some consistency can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Does it feel like home now for
yes,
you?
I can't really imagine moving back to the UK. I mean, London's a great city when you're in your 20s. You're going out every night, enjoying colleagues at work, going out for drinks. But when you're, after a while, all your friends start moving an hour or two outside London in order to have
the same thing happens.
have the property which they can have kids in. So I think and we love the fact that you can get outside Auckland so quickly. You've got the countryside, the beach. We love spending time up in
such a unique place. I often say that to friends in Australia that are like, what do you like about New Zealand, or what's so good about Auckland? And I'm like, it's very, very unusual, particularly in the context of Australia where you can fly for 8 hours and you're still in the frickin' country. Like, to drive 40 minutes in basically any direction from Auckland and you're somewhere where you feel like you're entirely outside of the city. That just doesn't happen in Melbourne. Like, you drive for 2 hours and you're basically in the outer suburbs.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, in some ways it can be similar to other countries, and it's just like, the ability to do things here is a lot easier, and I have a very big appreciation for, even if the traffic is bad, things are still really close, and I will never take that for granted.
I never expected to move to New Zealand, but I love being here. My wife always said that she didn't want to move back to New Zealand, and then I remember at a party we were at one time, some of my friends came over and said, "Oh, we're really going to miss you." I was like, "Why is that?" "Oh, but you're moving to New Zealand, aren't you?" So she thought we'd discussed and agreed that we were moving to New Zealand. I didn't really quite remember the conversation
that had happened.
But,
how good. So in New Zealand, you obviously have been here for a while now. You've got your house. What else have you been doing with your money? Are you now full-blown investing? Is it something that you decided, I guess, early on, we want to go down the property route, or we're bucking the kind of New Zealand Kiwi trend of investing in property?
I do have to admit, we do have a little bit of investment in property. Yeah. But I don't like the fact that New Zealand or any country just focuses on property investment, because whilst you need good properties for whether it's the commercial businesses there or the people who are going to live there, actually it's more about getting the quality there, and people should be investing in things that are going to generate benefits for the society, basically. And the easiest way to do that is investing in businesses. And so we have quite a wide portfolio of different investments. So yes, we do have some property, but also there's the Kiwi Saver, which is obviously invested in businesses. There's managed funds, and also have a little bit invested in individual businesses, which is nice to select the businesses you're quite interested in, including some very early stage businesses. So in the crowdfunding space, when that first came in New Zealand, I remember investing in the very first company, which was a brewery, and I got a great return on my investment. I got several boxes of beer before the business went insolvent. So it was, but
good learning experiences,
exactly, and it's sort of that. I can't give financial advice, but I don't think anyone should be investing a large portion of their money in sort of individual smaller businesses. But it's a great way to get interest and something that you want to support, with the potential that could go really well, or it might not be. So, and if it doesn't go really well, it's only a small portion of your portfolio, so it shouldn't be shouldn't cause you hardship.
Yeah, love that. Well, that probably perfectly leads us into talking about Catalist, because I think one thing that most of our listeners will be familiar with is we've talked a lot about the kind of core satellite general investment strategy around having your core in kind of, well diversified, like lower cost, very liquid investments. And, for a lot of Kiwis trying to get their head around the fact that your core is probably your Kiwi Saver or your retirement savings, whether that's in Kiwi Saver and, out of Kiwi Saver. And then your satellite investments are things that, to your point, like businesses that you're really interested in, or, early stage startups or something slightly different. And, before I guess we get into the details of Catalist, I just wanted to touch on that you spent 5 years at the FMA, which probably gave you a fantastic grounding into understanding what one can and can't do in the realm of financial services in New Zealand. So how did we get from there to you and your co-founder starting Catalist?
So worked for the FMA, the financial regulator, and I looked after the teams that did the regulation of markets and broking, so people who are trading investments. So I was really the person that people came to and complained about what wasn't working in the market.
Hearing some frustrations of, I wish I could do this, or this is a niggle.
Fault that I can't do this.
Yeah, right. Yep.
But I saw there, I spent quite a lot of time telling people, well, this is what the law says. This is what you can actually do to help solve the problems that you're pointing out.
Yep.
But they're really gnarly problems. I mean, the main problems that we were being told about, so access to money, access to capital.
From a business point of view.
Business point of view.
Yep.
So businesses, like if real startups, they tend to be actually okay. You've got whether it's self-funded or access to friends and family, but once you've sort of got over that initial stage, and before you're the sort of $100 million company that can list on NZX or go international, there's that big gap in the middle where you have really difficult access to capital. Saying that, the situation has improved a lot over the last sort of 5 to 8 years with venture capital in New Zealand. But even that is very focused on a particular type of business. So venture capital is focused on a particular pathway of growth, going international, having IP that's going to be world beating. Yeah. Whereas, your average, 97% of businesses in New Zealand, as we all know, are small businesses.
Yeah, it's a country of SMEs, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And most of those are not ever going to be of interest to venture capital funds.
Sure. But they employ a lot of people, and they're important to the economy.
And a lot of them make very good returns.
Yeah.
Better returns than if you look at some of the larger businesses that might be listed on the NZX. So how do we make sure that investors can benefit from that growth of those businesses, and also the businesses benefit from the investment so that they can continue to grow, and we have a better overall economy.
Yes.
And that's where my background has been, well, that's what markets do.
Sure.
At the big end of town, markets work really, really well to do that.
Yep.
Where we all get together, whether it's through the Kiwi Saver funds or through direct investing, through NZX. We can put in money into these large businesses, very liquid. We can get the money out whenever we want, and the business can raise money. That just doesn't work for smaller businesses. Generally, the ways of investing in smaller businesses, you might be able to privately buy some shares off someone, especially if you qualify. If you know someone, you might qualify as a wholesale investor, sophisticated investor. Generally, there's no way to then sell those shares other than trying to find someone else who might want to buy them, at which point...
You're kind of just handing off the liquidity problem, right? It's usually like the founder or the owner of that company then wanting to, get a bit of capital out to self-fund their retirement, for example, and it's like they're then passing the liquidity problem on to another person who then has the same challenge when they need that money.
Exactly, yeah. And that's... The point that the founder is also an investor in these small companies. If they don't have any way of getting that value out that they've put in over the years of founding the company, then you're really discouraging people from taking these leaps and growing businesses that are going to be the ones that are employing Kiwis and making the world a better place. Yeah.
And in the realm, I guess, then of small, like what does that look like financials wise, like monetary wise? Because I think most people have a general understanding that, to be on the NZX and to be on the main board or in the top 50 or whether it's the 20, they have an image of like, this is a pretty big organisation and a large market cap. Yeah. There's a huge range between, let's say, your Air New Zealands or your A2s to, a really successful like mum and dad business that has a turnover of, say, $2 million. So what's kind of the realm of small that we're talking about?
So we're not talking like corner dairies or something that is just providing a lifestyle income. Yep. But we're talking about something that is wanting to grow and is going to be producing enough return to make it worthwhile for someone else investing in them. And generally that's because they have aspirations of growing bigger. Maybe they want to become one of those companies that's large enough to be listed on NZX. And that's sort of success for us and for that company to help them through to that stage. And but before they get there, they need some way of accessing that capital. So we work with businesses all the way from startups. So we do a lot of work with angel investors in businesses that may have only just started up. Maybe they might be selling at a valuation of $1 million once they've got a good idea and a good team around that idea, all the way through to businesses that are 100 million in valuation and are looking at moving on to NZX.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have slightly different solutions for each of those. And so we have, through working with the regulator in order to get licensed, we have a public market, which everyone in New Zealand can invest in those businesses. But then we also do some trading for businesses that are only accessible to more sophisticated investors, wholesale investors, and then also completely private trading. So whilst we see ourselves as a stepping stone to the growth of businesses, we also have those little stepping stones within Catalist.
Yeah. So if you're a business, you can pick, I guess, the option that best fits for whatever your liquidity needs are, your growth plans, and then the size of your business at that point in time.
Yeah. And the whole idea of Catalist is that it just simplifies the process of transacting in whatever your investment is. Securities is the word we use for, if I don't know whether that's one that your listeners will be familiar with.
Yes.
So that's shares or might be bonds or whatever type of investment. It just makes it much simpler from the business's point of view to manage transactions. So that's you're raising new money by issuing those investments, or you might be giving your investors liquidity and allowing them to buy and sell.
Yes.
Or it could be raising new money through capital raising. So making that simpler process for the business.
Okay, cool. And so from the investor point, so the person on the street kind of thing, when do they look to Catalist? How does this kind of fit into the realm of, all the investment options out there in New Zealand? What would they kind of look to this for?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned the sort of satellite investments you have around your core. So Catalist is focused on helping people engage with those smaller businesses.
Yes.
So these are going to be businesses you might have a particular interest in. They might have very good returns, but they're also going to be higher risk. So these fall squarely within that satellite portion of your portfolio. So once you've got some investments in, say, Kiwi Saver, and you might also have a managed fund, but you've got your core investments, then having that extra portion it's useful from a couple of points of view. One is that you can access those investments you might be particularly interested in, support smaller companies that might be doing things that you want done in the world. But also on average, those smaller businesses, growth businesses, do tend to outperform the larger businesses when they do well.
Yes.
Obviously, it's a higher risk, so you will have a portion that don't do well, and so that's why it should always be a smaller portion of your business. An example is you can look at the venture capital funds. So those are funds which are specifically invested in a portfolio of these businesses.
Punakaiki
is one of the funds, and and they happen to be listed on our market. So you can invest in a fund like that and get a broad portfolio of smaller businesses. That's even when you're investing in the sort of satellites, higher risk, potentially higher return, it's still good to get a diverse portfolio of them.
Yes.
So you can start off with something like that, but then also once you've got a few, or you can just pick a number of them. But we never recommend just putting all your money in one basket.
Just one,
and
taking your 10% satellite and doing it all in one company and just hoping that's the thing.
That's going to be the next zero or something. You might be lucky, but actually you're going to, on average, perform better if you spread that across a number of different companies. But on average, if you have a portfolio of, say, at least 10 or 20 small businesses, then that portion of your portfolio should collectively perform better. And improve the returns of your whole portfolio.
Okay, love that. A question for you that we often get asked, because for whatever reason there seems to be a bit of I think it's particularly a Kiwi mentality of, New Zealanders don't seem to have as much home bias in their investing choices as, say, the US or Australia would have. Do you get asked, and kind of what would be your answer to this whole thing of like, why should I invest more in New Zealand? We're only 2% of the global economy, and then they start throwing all the facts at you, we're tiny, and then I live here and I work here and I already have so much money tied up in New Zealand. Why should I even bother with New Zealand? I just want to invest in the US.
Yep. I don't think investing in the US is necessarily a bad thing, but if you are living in New Zealand, then your costs are in New Zealand dollars. The benefits that are going to come from businesses are often the businesses that are around you. They're the ones that are going to be employing the people you're around you. So there are benefits from investing locally. And all of those, it doesn't mean there's not benefits also from investing in the businesses that again do best globally, but do you have the information to select those investments that are going to do best globally? If there were small businesses growing in the US, for example, and they're not providing services here in New Zealand, are you really able to monitor and keep track of what they're doing? So again, it becomes what is easiest for you to monitor, what's going to be the most interest to you, that's going to have produce things that align to your interests, and that includes the things like employing local staff.
Yeah, cool. So if someone was investing through Catalist and they wanted to start, find out some of those things, what type of information would typically be available to an investor around a company or a business that is available to invest?
Yes,
what would you kind of guide them to read up on?
Yeah, so we have, as you'd expect in a modern investment environment, a website that you can go to. You can see the marketplace, and each of the businesses you can invest in has their own page and the information there. And so it becomes very easy to navigate and to read up about those companies, to do your research, to do due diligence.
Yeah.
The sort of things that you want to be looking at. So there's the financial information, what the business is doing, what it's, why it thinks it's going to be growing, what it's going to be spending the money on in the future to enable it to grow. But I think the important thing for our public market, we are licensed and regulated in exactly the same way as the New Zealand Stock Exchange, NZX, which means that when you can invest in companies, the really important thing is that they've released all the information.
Right.
And so it's only when you go through those regulated exchange mechanisms that you get that information.
Yes.
So,
and there's very serious penalties if they don't release information, right?
Yes, and it means that's the bad as well as the good. So it's everything that you would that an investor would might reasonably be expected to influence the investment decision. So if you read all of the information available on that page for the businesses that are listed on our public market, you can know that they have been required to tell you everything, the bad and the good. So if you invest in something in a wholesale space, so that's only available to sophisticated investors, those rules don't normally apply. And that's where they're not allowed to be misleading. But if there's something that's perhaps some negative that they don't really want to be shouting around, as long as don't say something that's contradictory or misleading, then they can not tell you that information if they want to.
Yeah, right.
So that's why when we set up a platform to allow people to invest in these smaller businesses, it was really important to me to make sure it was fully regulated and it was subject to those same requirements, that at the point when you can buy or sell it, then that information is released. But we do trading in a slightly different way to the way it's done on NZX. So on NZX, you can go on there any day and buy and sell. And that's appropriate for those big businesses because there's always a lot of people that want to buy and sell. I mean, a good example is the Kiwi Saver funds, who are every single day, they've got more money coming in. So they're going in to buy more of those investments. If you're a small company or listed on an exchange like Catalist, then there's not going to be the same demand every single day to be buying and selling your shares. So if you have the ability to do it every day, that's actually negative for both the company and the investor. Because if you think about the way that prices are set on an exchange, you have willing buyers and willing sellers, and it tries to work out what the fair price is based on everyone's views of what the fair price is. If there aren't many people wanting to buy and sell, then suddenly no one wants to be the next person to put in a buy or sell order. Because if you do, if you don't know as much as the person next to you, then actually they're likely to be able to take advantage of your lack of knowledge and you get a price that's not fair. So exchanges mean that, or traditional exchanges mean that you create that virtuous cycle of liquidity once you've got a lot of people buying and selling. And really new information gets assimilated into the price really quickly. But for those smaller companies where there's not a lot of trading, it's actually a negative cycle where the lack of trading means that no one wants to be the next person to trade. So actually you have this downward spiral of no one trading. And there's NZX, but all major exchanges have this, where the smaller businesses, you often have really bad liquidity. So basically not a lot of trading going through.
Yes.
Catalist works slightly differently because we focus on those smaller businesses. We say, well, let's bring all the buyers and sellers together at points of time. And so it might just be quarterly trading. So once a quarter, you would get everyone together at a time they know. For a week, everyone puts in their buy and sell orders and everything trades at a single price at the end of that period.
Right.
So if you're the first person to put an order in and you put an order in that's too aggressively priced, and you might say you're prepared to pay more than it's worth, actually you don't end up paying that price. You pay the same price as everyone else.
Okay.
So you've removed that disincentive to be the first person to put an order in.
Yes.
And actually you create more trading on average, even though you're consolidating the trading into those points of time.
I see. Yeah, cool. Okay. And does the trading cycle vary based on, I guess, the size of the business, or is it kind of set across the platform?
No, absolutely. It's dependent on the size of the business.
Okay.
So we've got private businesses that just do trading amongst their own investors who might be employees who have got share schemes. So some of those do trading once every year or even once every 2 years. And we've got other companies that have done trading events once every month if there's enough investors.
They need to. Okay. Awesome. So starting Catalist, you're now in, I guess, this little group of people that are a founder, and you had a co-founder. How did you go about thinking around, how am I going to start this company given it is a highly regulated environment? You've said you wanted it to be set up in a way that it was highly regulated because then it was of benefit ultimately to the people that would be your customers. So I'm assuming that your background at the FMA would have given you quite a few insights around, what was the best way to approach this. But how long did it take you to get from the idea to reality, and how did you go through that?
It's probably about 2 years to get from leaving the FMA to set up Catalyst, going through the process of defining not just the rules around how the market would work, but also the checks and balances that need to be there. You need to be monitoring what trading's going through to make sure that everything's fair. So how is that going to work from a conceptual point of view? And then once you've got that agreed with the regulator, this is how it's going to work going forwards, you then also have to create the technology. I originally looked around and looked, well, is there something out there that can do this for us from a technology platform that we can buy into? But there's not really anything around the world. So I think, as far as I'm aware, we're the only stock exchange around the world, it's a licensed stock exchange that's focused on this size business, and it's doing these periodic trading auctions. Every single major exchange does periodic auctions. So NZX, for example, does at the beginning of every single day, it opens with an auction. But focusing on those smaller businesses and giving that same benefit, as far as I'm aware, we're the only ones doing that. So we had to start from scratch. Had one false start. So we went to a friend who had just got a technology company. He came in and said, well, let's build this together. When you dig into the detail of what you need, it's incredibly complicated. And it turned out it was probably a bit too complicated for the software engineers at his particular company. And so we ruled a line under that, and we said, well, we'll use that as a demonstration product. So we used that to sort of explain to people how it was going to work, which was useful. But then I got involved with the angel groups, and we did an accelerator program. So it's basically education program where you bring everyone involved in the company together. You have lots of connections with people in industry. You work on solely focusing on your project, and it's quite a hothouse of
they about 12 weeks. Is it kind of?
I think it was about 3 months, and it was down in Wellington. So I was still technically living in Auckland, but spending the weeks down in Wellington. So quite an intensive period. And during that, we connected with a lot of investors who were actually not just going to be people who would be able to fund some of the growth, but also people who are going to be key involved in the whole community of investment in New Zealand. And like any market, you need to get those connections. You're trying to get buyers and sellers all together, and it's this sort of chicken and egg situation. And until you've got one, you can't get the other. So it's working with those groups of people who are already investing in early stage businesses. We were able to start sort of looking at building up the market, and that's where during that process we had my co-founder join. He was solely focused on the technology, and that was really a learning for me, that having someone who is fully invested in the product as a co-founder who's going to really understand and own that technology product.
Of course.
He's been a real driver for how we've delivered the market so far.
Cool. Okay. And you are technically 3 years in now, 4 years in?
So we are 4 and a bit years in, I think, for the business. We launched our public market, so the licensed market, just over 2 years ago. And before that, we were doing some private trading.
Yes.
The technology, I guess, has probably been being used for just over 3 years.
Yeah. Nice. And have there been any personal money lessons from your end with raising capital and starting a business? Was it something that you and your wife prepared for mentally or financially a little bit whilst it was in ideation phase?
I guess we prepared a little bit, but I don't think you can ever fully prepare for the...
Of course.
Money wasn't the main motivator for me for setting up the business. It's because this is what I strongly believed New Zealand needed in order to benefit that part of the market. That means that it should, as a business, yes, we should make money, and it should benefit investors. And I got the investors on board because that would help grow the business and also those connections. But then once you've got the investors on board, you need to be delivering some returns for those investors and getting to the stage where you're breaking even and hopefully making profit, which for a technology and highly regulated business does take a long time.
You're here for a long time, not a good and short time. Exactly. Financial services.
But it's all about having the incrementally improving what your services are, then people you're delivering to. So I guess the lesson there is just being really selective about who it is you're connecting with, understanding why you're connecting with them from that investor's point, investor side. So we've had some great investors from the start, and especially from those that angel investment community.
Nice. And I guess then in terms of, growing the team and growing a business, how big are you guys now? Have there been hurdles along the way?
Yeah.
We feel like we're still in, do you still call yourselves a startup, or is the mental shift happening to,
I'd probably say we're a growth company, similar to the businesses that we're dealing with.
Yes.
I mean, we have to make sure we are very stable because we're providing a service that businesses and investors need us to be there for the long term. So we have taken choices to grow conservatively so far, and we'll maintain that. But so we've got, where we can outsource certain functions, we can do that. So we're still down at 5-6 permanent employees, but with some outsourced functions. We work very closely with a particular law firm who does an outsourced role for us. So it keeps the costs down, makes us nice and stable. And that gives us the base to grow from.
Awesome. And where to from here? Is there anything, I guess, on the horizon for Catalist that's exciting or upcoming, or is it kind of just more of the same and I guess encouraging more businesses to become more liquid within New Zealand?
I mean, encouraging more liquidity is really the key. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And there's a few different ways to do that. So we started off with the businesses that the business is buying into having a liquidity event. It wants to do that. And gradually, I think we're getting more and more businesses who are understanding the benefits for them as well as for the investors of doing that, refreshing the shareholders. So they've got that good relationship with their investors going forward. But we're also now doing some where you might have an investor who's invested in a business quite a long time ago, and they'd actually quite like to get their money out. A lot of businesses have preemptive rights. Is that something you've talked about on the podcast before?
No, we haven't. No.
So preemptive rights our concept that if you've invested a certain portion of a company, so maybe you own 5% of a company, and they're raising new money, you should have the right to keep your same 5% because you might want to vote a particular way and you don't want to be diluted. So new investment coming in, new shares means that your shares become less than 5%. Obviously, you need to pay for those additional shares. Yes. So the concept of preemptive rights is just that if a company is going to raise more money or if a existing investor is going to sell their shares, then you're offered your portion first. So you've got a first right of refusal on that. That's great from some points of view, but then if you think about an investor who wants to sell, it means, okay, I own, say, 5% of a company. If I want to sell that to a person I know wants to buy it over here, I need to first offer it at the same price to all the other existing investors, which then is going to put off anyone bothering to come and talk to me about buying the product. So we've now automated the process of preemptive rights offers. So we can, if an investor comes to us, we will then go to the company. So it's all in conjunction with the company and say, look, you've got preemptive rights in your constitution or your shareholders agreement, wherever the rights are set out. We can manage that process for you. The investor who wants to sell is going to be the one that's paying for it. So you as a company don't have to pay for anything. You can keep working on your business. You don't have to do the horrible Excel spreadsheets to try and work out who's who's got entitlement to what. We run the rights to invest in your portion, or for all the investors to invest in their portion through the platform. And then if there aren't enough investors, we can then invite in new investors at that price. So we can help the person who wants to sell get out of the or sell the shares that they want to sell, whilst also supporting the business by ensuring that it follows those preemptive rights processes, and that means it's a fairer price as well for the shares.
And I can imagine from how you described it, a lot of like headache, legwork, paperwork taken off of either the CEO or the founder, whoever's kind of in that role doing that capital raising. Because, knowing how we even run in Kernel, it's like that's a significant portion of time that needs to be committed by one person in the business to have those conversations and manage all of those shareholder engagements.
Absolutely. I think until someone goes through the process of managing their capital raise, and even if you've got external help to help you go out and find investors, that process of managing the whole subscription agreements, have they signed up to it, and what are the terms that they want, and have we
communicated with everyone else, and how is that going, and
it sucks up so much time. So essentially, yes, the platform is designed to be the place that simplifies that. You can still have, or the businesses still have, those great conversations with investors, but all of the admin is actually transacted on the platform. All of the money goes through the platform. The investment's done electronically through the platform. And it just makes life a lot simpler for those businesses. We've had businesses who haven't wanted to reach out to anyone other than their existing investors, but are using our platform to execute securities transactions because
much more simply.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Colin. This has been really helpful because I had a bit of an, general understanding of what Catalist did and, knowing how the markets work and that kind of thing. But I think it's really helpful seeing what the practical application is for both the investor and the business side, because I can certainly see, particularly in, within New Zealand, there's so many family-owned businesses that as, generational changes that we were touching on at the start of this, flow through society, like you just can kind of see how those businesses are not going to be passed down through generations. And so, for some people, this might present an option around, their retirement planning or, just a different option rather than passing on a business within a family or trying to find that great buyer, which is very hard for people who are exceptional at running their business to then, have that mindset shift and go into kind of capital hunting mode. It's a different mode, right?
Absolutely,
so I can absolutely see how you're filling a really well-needed gap and service. If people are interested either from the investment side or the business side, where is the best place to find info? Just on your website?
Just on the website. So Catalist with an I, catalist.co.nz. There's information there about the sort of investments. There's information for businesses who might want to list. We also do services for funds and for investment groups. So come and there's a link there with our contact details. So just come and have a chat to us.
Yeah, awesome. Thank thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll definitely be checking that out.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Really nice to speak to you.
Thanks, Colin.